It's Pride Month where the queerosexuals express their... What? It's what month? Yeah, I was never the best at planning. And depending on how this joke aged depends on the person who and when is watching. Well, with that set up ruined, might as well get this out the way.
I like One Piece.
So for those who don't know, created by Oda, One Piece tells the story of Monkey D. Luffy.
That's right, my first name is Monkey. My parents hated me.
Here he sets sail in order to find his idol Gold D. Roger's treasure, One Piece, in order to become the king of the pirates. Along the way, he gathers a motley crew and meets a wide variety of people, and despite being a pirate, he and his crew go around liberating people from more evil pirates, corrupt government officials, or sometimes both. One of the best things about One Piece is its rather diverse cast with many colorful and memorable characters, one of it being its LGBT representation, with some good and others, well, it's there. Then came the Wano arc and a new character appeared, introducing Yamato, the son of Kaido, or daughter. Ah, damn it. As you can imagine, the debate of Yamato's gender has caused a firestorm in the One Piece community, with many still going at it to this day, with many in the trans community claiming that Yamato is a trans man. Now before we start, I want to get this out the way. Trans rights are human rights. If Professor Berg respects the pronouns and any transphobe to the audience, I demand that you leave because I don't want you pricks here. I will not have you use this video for your own evil bigoted agenda.
You're a creep. Go away. We're having a good time until you shut up, jeepers.
At the same time, I know I'm going to piss off the people I'm trying to defend because I know that Yamato is not trans. And with me being a cisgender male who has no idea what it's like to be trans, this will rub some people the wrong way. Huh, what's that outside my window? Oh man, I am not making any friends with this video. And look, if you're not willing to hear me out and go on an angry comment spree, then I'll ask for you to leave as well because I don't want to deal with it. Because Yamato is not trans, and yes, I will be using she/her pronouns throughout this video and you'll see why. And I'm mainly going to be using a lot of historical context to clear up some mistranslations and cultural misunderstandings. Yes, I can see some of you pulling up this random Twitter user's tweets to describe stupid weebs. But you see, they use history and evidence to promote their hateful agenda. I use history and evidence to educate and help people understand. We're not the same. Again, I'm not one of those, oh, Yamato's a chick because she's got big titties. Big titties. And yes, at first, I did believe that Yamato was a trans man. But after the Wano arc ended and the dust settled, I decided to go back and take a look at things. Eventually doing my own research and coming across additional information that made me come to the realization that she was not. Just to clarify, just because I say this character is not trans doesn't mean I'm on the side of you crusty motherfuckers. So to any trans folks that are still in the audience and are not willing to learn, I politely ask you all to fuck off. Also, major spoiler warning for the Wano arc. Now before we talk about Yamato, we gotta talk about the legendary samurai, Kozuki Oden. Born 59 years before the main story, Kozuki Oden was a prodigy with him performing amazing feats even when he was a baby. He would later go on to become the daimyo of the Kuri region of Wano and was set to take his father's place as shogun. But Oden didn't want to be confined to his home and set out for adventure. He would go on to set sail with great pirates such as Whitebeard and Gold D. Roger, and was one of the very few people that can read the poneglyphs, which not only show where the One Piece was, but reveal the true history of the world. During this journey, he would meet a woman by the name of Toki and have two children, Momonosuke's son and Hiyori's daughter. Upon returning to his homeland, he would find that Wano was conquered by the traitorous Orochi and the pirate emperor Kaido. Still, Oden was allowed to live, but a deal was made. Wano would be free if he would perform humiliating tasks for 5 years. Despite everything, Oden did everything he could to free Wano despite looking like a fool. Upon realizing that the deal would not be honored and learning about the death of his friend Gold Roger, Oden would rise up to take back his homeland. Here he would take on Kaido, and in an intense battle, Oden almost defeated the pirate emperor. But he was tricked with one of Kaido's crew members disguised herself as Oden's son, thus distracting him, which led to his defeat, though Kaido hated winning a fight that wasn't fair and ended up killing her anyway. And for one final task, he was to save his followers, the 9 scabbards, all the while being boiled alive in over 700-degree oil. Kaido offered one more chance to Oden by demanding he translate the poneglyph, but Oden, with his pride and honor, refused, and because of that, Kaido killed him. And while Wano wept, Oden died with a smile on his face. But there was one who witnessed the execution of Oden, and that was a young Yamato. Yamato would go on to discover Oden's logbook and was inspired by him to the point of calling herself his name. She would then go on to rebel to the point of even fighting Kaido's own crew, but was punished by Kaido where she was locked up and isolated from the rest of the world, using cups that would explode and kill her if she were to leave. For Kaido's plan, he would to quote-unquote raise Yamato in secret to become the new shogun of Wano, to be his puppet ruler. Also during this time period, out of desperation, she would eat the mythical variant of the dog fruit, a devil fruit that gave her the power to transform into Wano's mythical wolf deity. So yeah, technically speaking, she is a werewolf. It has also given her ice powers as well. But thanks to meeting Porcus D. Ace, the older brother of our hero Monkey D. Luffy, and later meeting Luffy himself, Yamato dreamed of being free and being like Oden. Okay, now that we got both backstories out the way, why do people consider Yamato a trans man? Well, there's 3 reasons. 1, using he/him pronouns. 2, being called the son of Kaido. And 3, the bathhouse scene. Now at first glance, these seem like legitimate reason, but there's a lot more than people realize. But before we start, I want to go into statements that Oda made about this. So in Yamato's official bio, it stated that she is female. She was also featured in an official cover spread known as the Women of One Piece. And finally, whenever there's official One Piece merchandise, Yamato is constantly featured along other female characters, and is constantly called a woman. Now we can end this part here, but where's the fun in that? So let's start with the first one, using he/him pronouns. When we first meet Yamato, she says, Oden was a man, therefore I am too. At first this may seem like an open and shut case, but then something happens later on. See, when she first meets Momonosuke, she tells him that she's his father. And as you can imagine, Momonosuke wasn't really too happy to hear that. To give a reminder, Momonosuke is the son of Oden, and boy has this kid been through a lot. He watched his father die, he was transported 20 years into the future, long story, and he nearly was killed by the pirate emperor twice. And now he sees this crazy woman who happens to be the daughter of his greatest enemy claiming to be his father. Are you starting to see the problem here? Now this is where my argument comes in. Yamato is not trans because she sees herself as a man, but because she sees herself as Oden. Yamato doesn't show any signs of bi dysphoria and is comfortable who she is. Not to mention her kimono is based on the outfits worn by Shinto shrine maidens, or Miko. Now there'll be some of you out there that would say just because you're comfortable with your body or wearing a certain kind of fashion doesn't mean you can't be trans. And that's fair, as there are characters in One Piece who identify with the opposite gender despite looking like they're not. A prime example of this is Morley, one of the commanders of the Revolutionary Army. Morley here is a trans woman. I know this may seem odd to some of you as she looks like a big burly guy, but she identifies as a woman despite her looks saying otherwise, and she hates it when people misgender her. In fact, if you do look closely, she does wear schoolgirl skirts. Characters like Bon Clay or Imperial and Bon Cup are more gender fluid, as they use their devil fruit powers to allow them to switch genders, giving them a sense of freedom. You see, compared to the others, Yamato isn't claiming to be herself, but someone else. She's basically playing dress-up as her hero. Now, Yamato getting into a role is also a reference to Kabuki theater. For those that don't know, the Wano arc is structured like a Kabuki play, which is a form of Japanese theater. Originally, it was the women who played all the roles, both male and female. But then men took over and banned women from the practice, with now the men exclusively playing all the roles, including the women. Think even like the Japanese version of the theaters of ancient Greece or the Shakespeare plays back in the day, where even the female roles were also played by men. And the one thing I've heard from transphobes is that trans people are not their real selves, that they are pretending to be something that they are not. Let's put this through perspective, shall we? You have an abusive parent and they lock you away from the outside world for 20 years. And the only thing that's bringing you through this tough time is Superman. You read his comics, you watch his TV shows and movies, you just consume Superman media to help you out. However, due to the isolation, you tend to go crazy and you start to eventually believe that you're Superman. And that was the whole thing with Oden and Yamato. Oden was a way for Yamato to cope with her horrible situation. By believing she was Oden, she was able to escape the harsh reality she was in. As stated before, Yamato experienced 20 years of isolation with no one but an abusive father and his underlings. And whenever someone did show her any kindness, they would be punished severely. Hell, Kaido would treat his adopted children better than Yamato, making them commanders in his pirate crew. So Yamato's social skills are not that great, and her interactions with others outside of the Beast Pirates can lead to some awkward moment. Unless your Sanji or Brook, they don't see the mind. Now another factor comes into play is a mistranslation from Japanese. Now look, I'm not one of those, oh you filthy Westerners don't know the beauty that is the Japanese language. Because if you know me, you'll know that I am a filthy dub watcher. But upon doing my research, I can see where some of the confusion came from. So I'm going to be using English as a prime example here since it's the main language I and many others use, and even if English isn't your first language, you can probably understand enough since you're still watching this video, which, thank you by the way. So the thing is, English and Japanese are two completely different languages. What works in Japanese won't work in English and vice versa. Where I'm going with this is how Yamato addresses herself and those said pronouns. You see, when people address themselves, they tend to do it one way. For example, in English, most would use I, me, and my to address themselves. Pretty gender neutral there. But in Japan, it's a little different. If you watch Japanese media in its original language, especially anime, you probably notice the various ways people address themselves, such as watashi, ore, and boku. The latter two are more known for men to use with.
私
私
私僕俺
Now Yamato addressed herself as Boku, which is more masculine. And again, some would say that this shows that she's a trans man, but not really. You see, while it's rare for women to use Boku, it's not uncommon. In fact, in anime there's a trope called Bokuko, where female characters will use the word Boku, but it's mainly used by tomboys as while they may have more masculine traits and will use more male pronouns, but at the end of the day, they will still identify as women. Now in some rare cases, girly girls can use Boku as well. Because of the strict emphasis on gender norms in the West, this trope is rather new to many, thus they will mistake it for being trans. To give another example, the villain Big Mom also uses the more masculine ore when she addresses herself. In fact, many consider her one of the 4 pirate emperors, or in this case currently in the story, former emperor, and wants to be king of the pirates. Both titles are associated with men, and yet Big Mom is still female. Another factor people bring up is Luffy's nickname for Yamato, Yama Bro or Yama Guy. But this isn't really a direct translation. Luffy's actual nickname for her is Yama-O, which is similar to what he calls Law, which is Tora-O, though many of you would know it as Tra-Guy or Traffy in the official translations. This is due to the fact that the kanji at the end derives from the word Otoko, which means man. Again, you probably say, well, Luffy acknowledges Yamato as a man, so therefore that means case closed. But that's just Luffy's character, he's pretty carefree like that. Even then, he acknowledges that Yamato calling himself Oden is pretty dumb. Now again, I could end the video here, but I feel like I need to talk about a few more points that people will bring up. So let's go to our second one, the son of Kaido. Now from the very start, Kaido has referred to Yamato as his son. In fact, the name Yamato is actually a boy's name in Japan. And it was also the original name for Japan. It's also named for the actual ethnic Japanese people that most people know. It was also the name of an overrated battleship from World War II that was sunk but turned to an awesome anime spaceship that... Berg, you're getting off topic. So even this despicable villain Kaido, despite all he has done, such as murder, conquer, and enslave an entire country, even he is quite progressive enough to actually accept that his child is trans. Well, it's not as simple as you think. There are a couple reasons why Kaido refers to Yamato as his son. For starters, in Asian societies, especially back then, boys were seen as better than girls. Boys were seen as the rulers, head of the households, wanting to carry on the family name and business. Yeah, if you think Western-style patriarchy is bad, wait till you hear what the Asians have in store. And for families that mainly had daughters, some had to be raised as sons in order to get through this societal pressure. In fact, this practice is still used in some parts of Asia today, such as in Afghanistan where it's called Bancha Posh, where girls have to pose as boys in order to get better opportunities. And this practice has made a comeback when the Taliban retook the country in 2021. In fact, I recommend you check out the following pieces of media: Rose of Versailles, Princess Knight, The Breadwinner, Dororo, and Blue-Eyed Samurai, as each of these have female characters who have to disguise themselves as men in order to survive in their very patriarchal society. Especially with Dororo and Blue-Eyed Samurai, since both of them take place in the feudal/Edo area of Japan. As mentioned before, Kaido basically abused Yamato. He hid her for the longest time from the public and wanted her to be the shogun of Wano, because only males were allowed to. This is actually shown during the beginning of Wano, which for the longest time there was no male heirs to the title of shogun, thus almost putting the country into chaos until Oden's father Sukiyaki was born. This also becomes a climax at the end of Wano as we see Momonosuke become the shogun. Even though me personally, I feel it should have been his sister Hiyori, who I believe was more deserving of the title, but that's a whole nother discussion there. And this kind of thing was actually foreshadowed in the early days of One Piece. If you look back at Zoro's backstory, you see that his childhood friend Kuina was a very good swordsperson and wanted to be the best. However, due to her being a female, she was told she wouldn't amount to much. It doesn't help that in a Q&A, Oda revealed that both Quinn and Zoro are descendants of immigrants from Wano. So it's not that far-fetched that he said immigrants brought this sexist culture with them. You have to remember, Wano is based on Edo Period Japan, where women were not allowed to work and felt like their place was at the home, where they were expected to be good wives and mothers. Which comes back to the kabuki comparisons from earlier. Despite being forced out of the practice, kabuki theater was very popular with female audiences, and even though they were played by men, they would portray strong female characters, which was seen as revolutionary at the time. Case in point, Kaido forced Yamato's gender identity onto her, which is pretty messed up. For any trans people still watching this, you probably had to deal with people constantly telling you not the gender that you are, with some of them being from your own parents. Just because the positions are reversed doesn't make it right. And plus, before the mid-20th century, the idea of women dressing up as men to become warriors is very well known, as men were traditionally seen as the fighters, so many women had to disguise themselves as men in order to fight. The most famous example is these, of course, being Hua Mulan and Joan of Arc. However, this wasn't exclusive to military officials, as some historical leaders also had to deal with this as well. The female pharaoh Hatshepsut had to take on male roles and wear male clothing in order to be taken seriously by the Egyptian patriarchal establishment. That being said though, there have been trans men throughout history who have fought and still do to this day. So let's take a look at them, shall we? Originally starting off as a nun for the Catholic Church, Antonio de Arasa wanted a sense of adventure. And to show off his male identity, he became a conquistador, where he would take part in the conquest of what is now modern-day Chile and Peru. Yeah, he was a colonizing piece of shit, but hey, you gotta mix the bad with the good. Speaking of which, let's go with someone more positive. Albert Cashier was an Irish immigrant who fought for the Union during the American Civil War. Here he would take part in the Battle of Vicksburg, which was crucial in cutting off the Confederacy supply run and taking control of the Mississippi River. Even after the war, Albert still identified as a man and would take manual labor jobs, which was more well known for being male-oriented. During the last years of his life, the truth about his biological sex would be revealed and he would lose his veteran's benefits. However, the comrades he fought alongside would still stuck by his side despite what they heard. And finally, we have Emilia Robles Avila. Avila was a colonel during the Mexican Revolution where he fought in many battles. Despite his biological sex being female, he was always willing to prove that he was a man's man, especially in a rather conservative country like Mexico. Against all odds, he earned the respect of his troops under his command. According to some reports, if anyone misgendered Avila, he would threaten to shoot them. Which shows that trans people have been around for the longest time, and anyone who says otherwise is full of it. Alright, now that we got the historical and cultural context out the way, let's go to the third and final reason why people think that Yamato is a man. The bathhouse scene. So in this scene we see Yamato go into a men's bathhouse, and this is only backed up more when Kiku, a trans woman, goes with the ladies. Now at first glance, this seems like this would confirm it, but there's two things that go against this. One is that this can go to the whole Oden identity thing where Yamato believes because Oden was a guy, therefore she must go to the men's bathhouse. And two, if you know how One Piece goes, Oden has a style of humor similar to that of Akira Toriyama's early Dragon Ball. Meaning Oden loves to pull gags and jokes that are rather sexual and perverted in nature, and bath scenes are usually his go-to when it comes to comedy. And we can see this with Sanji and Brook losing their minds over this. And that right there are the reasons why Yamato is not trans. Now look, if your headcanon is that Yamato is trans, then I can't stop you. Everyone, including myself, has their own little headcanon alternate universe, and there's nothing I can do about that. Like I said earlier, this video doesn't come from a place of hate, only for educational purposes. And I understand that trans representation is scarce and people desperately want it. Look, it's no secret that trans people are constantly under attack, as their existence seems to go against what is known as the quote-unquote social norm, with governments and powerful officials making them the target of horrible legislations and propaganda. It doesn't help that you also face the vitriol of many famous celebrities that you used to look up to and wonder why they got you in the first place, and using their high status to promote misinformation and hatred. Hell, sometimes you get flack from your own people. So for many people to see this kind of representation in a popular show like One Piece seems like a good thing. But as mentioned earlier, there are some trans characters in One Piece who are pretty cool. But despite the fact that them being total badasses and great allies to Straw Hats with them having their own arcs and developments, at first glance, many of them do kind of give off the negative trans stereotypes, and that can be off-putting at first. But then there's the aforementioned Kiku, who finally shoves these stereotypes to the side. As stated before, Kiku was born a male but identifies as a woman. In fact, in the English dub, her voice actress is actually a trans woman. She is so awesome as she is one of Oden's scabbards and has her chance to shine. And in official merchandise, they do show that Kiku is a woman. Even with or without the whole gender thing, I feel like Yamato's character could have been handled better. Look, I love the Wano arc. It has some of my favorite moments in One Piece, but it was super bloated with characters that weren't needed and some that needed more attention than others. Overall, I'm basically saying that Yamato deserves so much better. But with how Oda has a habit of bringing back characters, I feel like this is the end of her story. In fact, at the time of this video, currently in the manga, there's a side story with Yamato called Onichao Yamato, where she goes all over Wano to retrace the steps of Oden. I mean, just look at her, she's just so precious. Along the way, she beats up one of Kaido's henchmen and reconciles with her adopted siblings. So yeah, we're definitely going to be seeing more of her in the future. Wait a minute, I just thought of something. She was imprisoned and enslaved, she can talk to animals, was cursed with a somewhat poisoned fruit that gave her ice powers, daddy issues with no mother in sight, wants to see the world beyond her kingdom, disguises herself as a man to fight a conqueror with a Fu Manchu mustache in order to free an East Asian-style country with a reddish dragon sidekick. Oh my god! Yamato's a Disney princess! Everyone was fighting over her gender that we couldn't see the bigger picture.
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
Overall, whether she is Oden, the son of Kaido, the only princess, man or woman, Yamato should learn that Yamato is Yamato.
I am Oden after all.
Shame that it took so long to rescue me from the guilt you used to tie me to your family.